Hello and welcome back to Cheating Tales Lab. We're grateful for each view and comment. Tell us, from which country or city are you watching today? We enjoy connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Blueprint of Deception. Russell Webb stood at the edge of his property, surveying the sprawling 5,000-square-foot modernist home he'd designed himself. The clean lines and dramatic angles weren't just architectural choices. They represented order, precision, and control. At 42, Russell had built apex architectural design from nothing into one of Boston's most prestigious firms. The early morning frost crunched beneath his boots as he walked the perimeter, coffee warming his hands. Inside that perfect house, his wife of 12 years, Natalie, was still sleeping. Or pretending to sleep. Russell knew the difference. 5 months ago, he'd noticed the first signs. The unexplained late nights. The sudden password changes on her phone. The way she tilted her screen away when texting. Small betrayals that preceded the larger one. Russell's grandfather had taught him patience during long fishing trips on Lake Champlain. The moment you feel the bite, you wait, he'd say. React too quickly, you lose everything. Russell had been waiting since the day he found the hotel receipt in Natalie's purse. Brookline Hotel, room 317, paid in cash. He hadn't confronted her then. Instead, he watched and documented. Natalie had married him when he was still struggling, when they lived in a cramped apartment and worked 80-hour weeks. She'd believed in him then, or so he thought. Her family hadn't approved. The daughter of Dr. Philip Montgomery, renowned neurosurgeon, marrying a blueprint sketcher from South Boston? Unthinkable. They'd made their disapproval clear at every holiday, every gathering. As Russell's success grew, Natalie's attitude changed. The woman who once brought him coffee during late-night drafting sessions now spent her days at expensive spas with friends he'd never met. The passion that once burned between them cooled to formal politeness. Russell's phone buzzed. A text from Doug Pearson, his oldest friend and now his lawyer. "It's all set. You're protected. Just say when." Russell typed back, "Thanksgiving. Let them gather first." Doug responded immediately, "Cold, man. Ice cold. But they deserve it." Russell pocketed his phone and headed back inside. In his home office, he unlocked the hidden wall safe behind a framed architectural award and extracted a leather-bound portfolio. Inside were photographs, bank statements, GPS records, and hotel receipts. Evidence gathered methodically over months. At the bottom lay a single photograph. Natalie and Theodore, Teddy Klein, her former college boyfriend, now her secret lover, kissing outside the Brookline Hotel. The timestamp showed 2:37 p.m. on a Tuesday when Natalie had claimed to be visiting her sister in Providence. Teddy Klein had reappeared in their lives 8 months ago at a charity gala. Russell had thought nothing of it then, just another plastic surgeon in Natalie's father's circle. He hadn't known about their history until his investigation began. Russell returned everything to the safe just as he heard Natalie's footsteps on the stairs. "You're up early," she said, tightening her silk robe. Her blonde hair was perfectly messy, her smile practiced. "Big project deadline," he responded, kissing her cheek. She smelled of expensive perfume and secrets. "Don't forget we're having Thanksgiving at Daddy's this year," she said. "He's invited the Kleins too. Isn't that nice? You and Teddy seem to get along so well at the benefit." Russell met her eyes steadily. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." After she left, Russell made a single call to his brother Scott, the only family he had left. "They've scheduled their execution," Russell said quietly. "Thanksgiving Day. You sure about this path?" Scott asked. "There's no coming back. They took something from me," Russell replied. "Now I'll take everything from them." Russell returned to his drafting table and continued working on his newest design. Not a building this time, but something far more precise. The complete dismantling of his wife's world, brick by calculated brick. Chapter 2, Structural Weakness. The Montgomery mansion stood like a colonial fortress in Beacon Hill, old money displayed in every meticulous detail. Russell parked his Tesla behind a row of luxury vehicles 3 weeks before Thanksgiving and straightened his tailored suit. These Sunday dinners had become theater, everyone playing their parts while the real drama festered beneath polite conversation. Inside, Dr. Philip Montgomery held court in the study, glass of scotch in hand as he regaled his audience with tales of his latest medical triumph. Teddy Klein stood among the admirers, laughing too loudly at Philip's jokes. Russell. Philip's voice boomed without warmth. Drink. Bourbon. Neat, Russell replied, noting how Natalie subtly shifted closer to Teddy. Her diamond tennis bracelet caught the light, a recent gift Russell hadn't given her. Philip's wife, Beverly, appeared with Russell's drink. Natalie tells us you've been working late every night. The Danforth Tower project must be quite demanding. Russell smiled. Actually, that project wrapped up weeks ago. I've been focused on personal matters. He caught the flash of alarm in Natalie's eyes before she masked it. Dinner proceeded with the usual undercurrent of condescension. Philip discussing his investments, Beverly critiquing the new neighbors, Natalie's sister Olivia showing off photos from her European vacation. And what's new at your little firm, Russell? Philip asked. Any birdhouses or dog kennels on the horizon? The table erupted in polite laughter. Russell had endured 12 years of these jabs, each one designed to remind him of his perceived inferiority. Actually, Russell replied calmly, we've been contracted for the new Franklin Medical Center expansion. The silence was immediate. Philip nearly choked on his wine. That's my hospital, he said. Yes, Russell confirmed. Your board unanimously approved my design last week. What Russell didn't mention was how he'd secured the contract by drastically underbidding and calling in favors from 3 board members whose homes he'd designed. It was a financial loss, but a strategic gain. Architecture wasn't just about buildings. It was about understanding foundations and pressure points. After dinner, Russell excused himself to the bathroom, but instead slipped into Philip's study. He quickly located the safe behind a mediocre hunting painting and, using the combination he'd observed Philip using months ago, opened it. Inside, he photographed several documents before carefully returning everything to its place. Walking back to the dining room, he passed Natalie and Teddy in the hallway, their bodies too close, conversation too intimate. They jumped apart when they noticed him. Russell, Teddy said with artificial cheer. Natalie was just telling me about your anniversary trip to Bora Bora. Sounds amazing. Yes, Russell replied smoothly. She enjoys paradise settings. Though sometimes paradise isn't what it seems. Later, driving home in separate cars, Natalie claiming a headache and needing some air, Russell called Doug. I need the papers filed tomorrow, he said. And I want the penthouse prepared by Wednesday. That fast? Doug asked. What about the house? Everything's been transferred. The trap is almost set. Russell hung up and glanced at Natalie's car behind him. She was on the phone, animated, likely speaking to Teddy. Russell knew their plan. Wait until after the holidays. Then Natalie would ask for divorce, expecting to take half his assets and the house. She and Teddy would start their new life, and Russell would be left with nothing. But Russell had learned long ago to build with contingencies. While they thought he was oblivious, working late on projects, he'd been systematically restructuring his life. The house, once jointly owned, had been quietly transferred solely to his name through a complex legal maneuver involving Natalie's signature on what she thought were routine business documents. His company, which Natalie believed was in both their names, had been protected through a trust he'd established years ago. His liquid assets had been moved to accounts she couldn't touch. Most importantly, he'd documented everything. Her affair, her plans, the strategic lies. In Boston legal circles, prenuptial agreements could be challenged, but evidence of infidelity remained powerful. As Russell pulled into their driveway, he received a text from an investigator he'd hired. Meeting confirmed. 3 p.m. Brookline Hotel. Room 412. Russell smiled grimly. Natalie and Teddy's confidence had made them careless. Tomorrow, while he appeared to be in New York for a client meeting, he'd be gathering the final pieces of evidence. That night, Russell acted the part of oblivious husband as Natalie chatted about Thanksgiving plans. Teddy's wife Meredith is bringing her famous apple pie, she said, testing him. Sounds delicious, Russell replied, watching her face fall slightly at his apparent lack of jealousy. He kissed her goodnight, tasting her lies, and fell asleep planning the moment when he would tear down everything she held dear. Chapter 3. Load-Bearing Secrets. 2 days before Thanksgiving, Russell sat across from Doug in a private room at Winston Steakhouse, spreading documents across the mahogany table. Everything's in place, Doug said, sliding a thick folder toward Russell. The judge signed off this morning. I've got Sheriff Dawson on standby for Thanksgiving Day. Russell examined the court order. After 12 years of marriage, It had taken just 3 weeks to legally sever most ties to Natalie. The official divorce would come later, but this emergency order was the weapon he needed. "You sure about the timing?" Doug asked, cutting into his rare steak. "Doing this at her family's Thanksgiving dinner is brutal." Russell took a sip of his Cabernet. "They've spent 12 years treating me like garbage. Philip once told me I wasn't even good enough to design his garden shed. When Natalie and I were struggling, they offered no help. Actually suggested she leave me. Now that I'm successful, they pretend to tolerate me while plotting behind my back." "And Natalie?" Russell's eyes hardened. "She's been funneling money to a secret account for months. Almost $300,000. She and Teddy have put a deposit on a condo in Back Bay. She was going to blindside me after the holidays." Doug whistled low. "How'd you find all this out?" "I built my company analyzing structural integrity, finding weaknesses before they cause collapse." Russell's voice was emotionless. "I applied the same principles to my marriage." What Russell didn't share was the night he'd followed Natalie to Teddy's office after hours, how he'd listened through the door as they planned their future, laughing about how Russell would be too proud to fight for alimony despite Massachusetts being an equitable distribution state. How they discussed which of Russell's business connections they could poach after the divorce. "There's one more thing," Russell said, unlocking his phone and handing it to Doug. Doug's eyes widened as he swiped through photos. "Jesus, Russell. These are from inside Philip's safe. Is that blackmail material?" Philip's been pressuring doctors at his hospital to refer patients to certain specialists who kick back to him, including Teddy. "It's all documented there. Names, dates, amounts. I've sent copies to the hospital board and state medical licensing authorities. They'll receive them Friday morning." "You're not just burning bridges," Doug said quietly. "You're nuking the entire landscape." "They thought I was weak," Russell replied. "That I would roll over when Natalie left. That I'd sacrifice everything to avoid scandal. They were wrong." Later that evening, Russell entered his house to find Natalie preparing a small suitcase. "Going somewhere?" he asked mildly. She startled. "Oh, just packing a few things to stay at my parents' tomorrow night. Daddy wants help preparing for Thanksgiving." She hesitated, then added with practiced concern, "You'll come straight there, right? Around 1. "I wouldn't miss it," Russell assured her, playing his role perfectly. That night, he lay awake beside her, remembering their early years. How she'd once fallen asleep against his shoulder while he worked on designs. How they'd celebrated his first major commission with champagne on their apartment roof. He'd loved her completely then. Morning brought a flurry of activity as Natalie prepared to leave. Russell kissed her goodbye with convincing tenderness. "I love you," he said, meaning it as a final farewell to what they'd once had. "Love you too," she replied automatically, already mentally elsewhere. After she left, Russell walked through their home one last time, past the photographs documenting their life together. In his office, he opened his safe and removed a small velvet box containing Natalie's grandmother's ring, the one she'd claimed to have lost last year. He'd found it hidden in her jewelry box, apparently too precious a connection to her family to wear while betraying him. Russell placed the ring in an envelope along with a simple note. Some things should stay in the family. He then packed a single suitcase and took one last look at the house he'd designed with love and would now use as a weapon. Tomorrow, everything would change. The infrastructure of lies Natalie had built would collapse under the weight of truth, engineered to fall at precisely the moment when it would cause maximum damage. Russell's phone rang, Scott checking in. "It's all set," Russell confirmed. "This time tomorrow, it'll be done." "And you're sure this is what you want?" Scott asked. "Not just the divorce, but the scorched earth?" Russell thought about Philip's condescension, Natalie's betrayal, Teddy's smirking face, and the years of subtle humiliation. "Some structures can't be repaired," he said finally. "They need to be demolished entirely before something honest can be built." Chapter 4. Controlled Collapse. Thanksgiving Day arrived crisp and clear. Russell adjusted his tie in the mirror of his hotel suite, his expression betraying nothing of what was to come. The Thomas Grande Hotel's penthouse offered a commanding view of Boston Harbor, a fitting command center for the day's operations. His phone buzzed with a text from Scott. "They're all there. Philip, Beverly, Olivia, and her husband, Teddy, and his wife Meredith. Natalie looks nervous." Russell had arranged for Scott to arrive early, ostensibly to help with preparations, but actually to confirm everyone's presence and to plant the small recording devices Russell had provided. On my way, Russell replied. Stay close to Teddy's wife. She'll need someone when it happens. Poor Meredith Klein, collateral damage in this war. Russell had considered warning her, but ultimately decided against it. Her discovery of her husband's betrayal would contribute to the day's chaos. Russell's phone rang, Doug calling as planned. Sheriff Dawson is positioned nearby, Doug confirmed. He'll wait for your signal before approaching with the papers. Everything else has been executed. The accounts are frozen, the passwords changed, the locks at the office altered. And the house? Russell asked. Locksmith finished an hour ago. Alarm codes are reset. The movers arrive tomorrow at 9. Russell hung up and took one last look in the mirror. He straightened his burgundy tie, Natalie's favorite, and headed out. The drive to Beacon Hill took 20 minutes. Russell parked directly in front of the Montgomery mansion, not bothering with the designated area around the corner. He wouldn't be staying long. Scott met him at the door, tension evident in his face. They're in the dining room. Natalie asked about you twice. The familiar sense of Thanksgiving filled the house. Turkey, cranberry, Beverly's signature herb stuffing. Russell paused in the hallway, hearing laughter from the dining room. He checked his watch, 1:17 p.m. The stage was set. He entered the room to sudden silence. 8 faces turned toward him, some surprised, some wary. Russell, Philip boomed with false joviality. We were beginning to think you'd forgotten us. Natalie's smile was strained. Darling, you're just in time. We were about to carve the turkey. Russell surveyed the table. Crystal glasses caught the light. Silver platters gleamed. The Montgomery family china, used only for important occasions, was perfectly arranged. Everything proper, polished, and utterly false. Actually, Russell said calmly, I won't be staying. Beverly frowned. But Natalie prepared your favorite cranberry relish. Russell's gaze found Teddy, who was studying his wine glass with sudden fascination. Beside him, Meredith shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension. I just came to deliver some news, Russell continued. Natalie, your things have been packed. You have until noon tomorrow to collect them from the house before they're donated to charity. Shocked silence descended. Natalie's face drained of color. What are you talking about, she managed. I think you know, Russell replied. Room 412. The Brookline Hotel. Tuesday afternoons for the past 6 months. Quite a convenient location, halfway between my office and Teddy's practice. Meredith's gasp was audible. Teddy began a stammered denial that died under Russell's cold stare. Philip stood abruptly. Now see here. Sit down, Philip, Russell cut him off. Your corruption investigation begins Monday. The board already has the evidence. Turns out medical kickback schemes leave quite a paper trail. Philip sank back into his chair, his face ashen. Natalie found her voice, her tone shifting to anger. You can't just throw me out. That house is half mine. Russell allowed himself a small smile. Actually, it's not. Remember those business documents you signed last year? The ones you didn't bother to read because you were in a hurry to meet Teddy? You transferred your interest in the house to me. Natalie's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. As for your belongings, Russell continued, I've been quite thorough in separating what's yours from what's mine, including the money you've been diverting to your secret account. The bank has been informed those transfers were unauthorized. You son of a bitch, Natalie whispered. At Thanksgiving dinner, my wife pointed to the garage. Your plate's out there, with the trash, she said. You embarrass us. Her father agreed. Should have left him years ago. I stood there, humiliated. Suddenly, my phone rang loudly. It was my lawyer on speaker. The judge signed the order, he said. She has 24 hours to vacate his house. My wife dropped her wine glass, and her family froze. Russell recited calmly, watching their expressions shift from confusion to recognition. That's what you planned to do today, wasn't it? Humiliate me one final time before telling me about the divorce. Teddy was going to announce your engagement at dessert. Such a touching holiday moment. Natalie's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. Right on cue, Russell's phone rang. He answered on speaker. Yes, Doug. The judge signed the final order. Doug's voice filled the room. She has 24 hours to vacate your house and surrender all keys and access codes. Sheriff Dawson is ready to serve the papers. Send him in, Russell replied. As if timed by a theatrical director, the doorbell rang. Scott went to answer it, returning with Sheriff Dawson, who looked uncomfortable in the tension-filled dining room. Mrs. Winters? He asked, approaching Natalie. I have court orders to serve you. The sheriff placed a thick envelope in front of Natalie, nodded apologetically to the stunned gathering, and quickly departed. Russell turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. He removed a small envelope from his pocket and placed it on the sideboard. Your grandmother's ring, he said to Natalie. The one you lost last year. Some things should stay in the family. With that, Russell walked out, closing the door on Natalie's angry sobs and the erupting chaos behind him. As he descended the front steps, he heard Meredith's voice rising in accusation, Philip's attempting damage control, and Teddy's desperate denials. Russell got into his car and drove away, heading back to his hotel. The foundation of his old life had been demolished in less than 10 minutes. Now he would begin building something new on the ruins. Chapter 5, Fault Lines. 3 days after Thanksgiving, Russell sat in his office at Apex Architectural Design, reviewing the damage reports like a general assessing a successful campaign. Philip Montgomery had been suspended pending investigation by the hospital board. Early signs indicated he would lose both his position and his medical license. The scandal had already made the front page of the Boston Globe, though Russell's name had been carefully kept out of the reporting, a condition of his anonymous tip. Teddy Klein's practice was hemorrhaging patients, and the medical board had opened a separate investigation into his involvement in Philip's referral scheme. His wife Meredith had publicly filed for divorce, hiring one of Boston's most aggressive attorneys. And Natalie? Russell opened a report from his private investigator. She had moved in with her sister Olivia temporarily. Attempts to access her secret bank account had failed. Russell's legal team had already provided evidence of the unauthorized transfers, resulting in a freeze. Her credit cards, supplementary cards on Russell's accounts, had been canceled. She'd been spotted meeting with 3 different divorce attorneys, all of whom had declined to represent her after initial consultations. Russell had made sure every top law firm in Boston had a conflict of interest with her case. Some he'd previously hired for business matters. Others he'd given substantial donations to their charitable foundations in the weeks before Thanksgiving. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. His assistant Veronica entered with coffee. Ms. Montgomery is in the lobby again, she said, using Natalie's maiden name as Russell had instructed. Should I call security? No need, Russell replied. Tell her I'm in a meeting that will last several hours. She's welcome to wait. Natalie had appeared at his office every day since Thanksgiving, alternating between teary pleas and angry demands. Russell had refused to see her each time. Also, Veronica added, Mr. Klein called again. He insists it's urgent. Block his number, Russell said, and have IT make sure our client list is secured. He's been calling our contacts. Russell's phone buzzed with a text from Scott. She's emptying storage unit now. Mover's truck has Montgomery Dental logo. Russell had expected this. The storage unit contained Natalie's seasonal clothes and personal items he'd had packed and moved. He'd deliberately left it accessible, a small mercy that satisfied legal requirements while allowing him to monitor her movements. The Berlin project team is waiting in conference room A, Veronica reminded him. Russell nodded and gathered his materials. Life and business continued. His company had just secured the contract for a major international development in Germany, partly because one of his competitors had unexpectedly withdrawn after learning that Russell was bidding. That competitor, Westfield Design, was owned by Philip Montgomery's brother-in-law. Russell had made sure the connection between their withdrawal and Philip's troubles remained invisible, but nonetheless effective. As Russell presented his designs to the Berlin investors, his phone vibrated continuously in his pocket. After the meeting, he checked the missed calls, Natalie, Teddy, and surprisingly, Beverly Montgomery. He listened to Beverly's voicemail with grim satisfaction. Russell, please, her voice quavered. Phillips had a minor heart attack from the stress. The doctors say he'll recover, but this investigation is killing him. Surely there's something you can do. For Natalie's sake, if nothing else. Russell deleted the message without responding. He remembered clearly how Beverly had treated him when he and Natalie were first dating. The subtle digs about his background, the helpful suggestions that Natalie could do better. During their second Christmas together, Beverly had given Natalie a business card for a dating service, saying within Russell's hearing, "Just in case this doesn't work out, dear." Now she wanted mercy? Russell had none to give. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Webb, Sheriff Dawson is here to see you." Russell frowned. This was unexpected. Send him in. Sheriff Dawson entered, looking uncomfortable in the sleek modernist office. Mr. Webb, I thought you should know. Your wife, ex-wife, and Dr. Klein tried to enter your house this morning. When they couldn't get past the new security system, they broke a window. Neighbor called it in. Were they arrested? Russell asked calmly. No, sir. They were gone when my deputy arrived. But we have the security footage. Thought you might want it for your divorce proceedings. Russell nodded. Thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate the courtesy. After Dawson left, Russell called Doug. They tried to break in. I want a restraining order against both of them. Use the security footage. On it, Doug replied. Also, the judge denied Natalie's emergency petition for temporary support. Her claim that she has no access to funds didn't hold up when we showed evidence of her secret account. That evening, Russell drove to his house, not to stay, but to assess the damage. The broken window had already been repaired by his security company. Inside, he walked through silent rooms, remembering how he'd once carried Natalie across the threshold, both of them laughing. His phone rang, unknown number. Russell Webb, he answered. You've destroyed everything. Teddy's voice slurred with alcohol. My marriage, my practice, my reputation. You did that yourself, Russell replied coldly. The moment you touched my wife. It wasn't just sex, Teddy spat. We love each other. Have for years. She only stayed with you for the money. And now she has neither, Russell said before hanging up. In the master bedroom, Russell noticed the closet door ajar. Inside, one of Natalie's dresses remained, a red silk number he'd bought her for their 10th anniversary. He removed it from the hanger and took it to the kitchen. Opening the trash compactor, he stuffed the dress inside and pressed the button, watching dispassionately as the machine crushed it into nothing. His phone buzzed again, another text from Scott. She's at the Harrington bar with Teddy. Both look wrecked. Want me to listen in? No need, Russell replied. It's enough to know they're suffering together. Russell left the house and drove to his hotel. Tomorrow, the movers would come for his remaining things. The house would be listed for sale next week, priced well below market value to ensure a quick sale. He didn't care about the financial loss. The property held too many memories. As he entered his suite, his phone rang again, Natalie calling from yet another unknown number. This time, he answered. What do you want? He asked flatly. I want to understand, she sobbed. How could you do this? To my father? To my family. The same way you planned to do it to me, Russell replied. The difference is, I succeeded. I made a mistake, she pleaded. A terrible mistake. But 12 years, Russell. Doesn't that mean anything? It meant everything, he said quietly. Until you threw it away. He hung up and blocked the number, then walked to the window overlooking the city. Somewhere out there, Natalie and Teddy were drowning their sorrows, their dreams of a comfortable future together shattered. Philip was in a hospital bed, his career in ruins. Beverly was frantically calling their social connections, most of whom were distancing themselves from the scandal. Russell felt no joy in their suffering, but no remorse either. They had underestimated him, dismissed him, planned to discard him. Now they were paying the price. His phone rang once more, Doug again. You didn't tell me you were selling the house, his lawyer said without preamble. Just decided today, Russell replied. You could get much more if you waited. I don't need the money, Russell said. I need the closure. After hanging up, Russell opened his laptop and began working on a new design, a house for himself, smaller than the current one, but more thoughtfully planned. A structure built without compromises or concessions to anyone else's tastes. A place where no one could betray him. Chapter 6, Aftershocks. 1 month after Thanksgiving, Russell stood at the window of his temporary office in New York, watching snow fall over Central Park. He'd taken a consulting position with a major architectural firm, partly to distance himself from Boston during the divorce proceedings, but mainly to focus on work while the aftershocks of his actions gradually subsided. His phone buzzed with a text from Doug. Judge granted final divorce decree. Montgomery family lawyer tried last-minute arguments about coercion and fraud. Judge shut it down completely. It's done. Russell felt a complex wave of emotions, relief, vindication, and a hollow emptiness he hadn't anticipated. 12 years of marriage, ended by a judge's signature. Any issues with the settlement? Russell replied. None. She gets exactly what the prenup specified, minus penalties for infidelity. About 1.2% of your current net worth. She's appealing, but it won't go anywhere. Russell set down his phone and returned to his drafting table. The Boston house had sold within days, as he'd expected. The New Berlin project was progressing well. His firm in Boston was stable under his operations manager's temporary leadership. On paper, Russell's life was proceeding perfectly, yet something felt unfinished. His assistant knocked and entered. "Mr. Webb, you have a visitor. A Ms. Olivia Carson? She says she's your former sister-in-law." Russell frowned. "Send her in." Olivia entered cautiously, looking thinner and more tired than Russell remembered. Gone was the polished socialite who had once mocked his quaint background at family gatherings. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, declining his offer to sit. "I won't stay long." "What can I do for you, Olivia?" Russell asked coolly. "It's about Natalie." Olivia hesitated. "She's not well, Russell. She's been drinking heavily, barely eating. She lost her job last week." "That's unfortunate," Russell replied without inflection. "But not my concern anymore." "She loves you," Olivia said. "What happened with Teddy? It was a mistake. A terrible mistake. But does she deserve to have her entire life destroyed?" Russell studied Olivia's face, looking for manipulation or deceit, but saw only genuine concern. "Where is Teddy in all this?" he asked. "I thought they were so deeply in love." Olivia's expression hardened. "He left the state 3 weeks ago. When his medical license was suspended, he abandoned her. Apparently their love couldn't withstand a little adversity." Russell suppressed a bitter smile. Of course Teddy had fled when things got difficult. Men like him always did. "Again, not my problem," Russell said. "Your sister made her choices." "And my father?" Olivia asked. "Was destroying his career part of your revenge too?" "Your father built his career on corruption and kickbacks," Russell replied evenly. "I simply exposed what was already there." "He'll never practice medicine again," Olivia said quietly. 40 years of saving lives ended because his daughter made a mistake. "No," Russell corrected. "Ended because he chose to break the law." "Don't mistake consequence for revenge, Olivia." She stared at him for a long moment. "You're not who I thought you were, Russell." "None of us are," he replied. "That's the lesson here, isn't it?" After Olivia left, Russell canceled his afternoon meetings and walked through snowy Central Park, considering their conversation. Was he being unnecessarily cruel? Had his revenge gone too far? No, he decided. The Montgomerys had reaped exactly what they'd sown. Philip's criminal activities had nothing to do with Russell's marriage. Natalie's current state was the natural consequence of her actions. The fact that Teddy had abandoned her only confirmed Russell's assessment of his character. His phone rang, Scott calling from Boston. "Just checking in," his brother said. "Doug told me the divorce is final." "Yes," Russell confirmed. "It's done. And how do you feel about that?" Russell considered the question. Vindicated, but not finished. "What's left?" Scott asked warily. "Beverly," Russell replied. "She's still untouched by all this." "Jesus, Russell," Scott sighed. "Isn't it enough? Philip's career is over. Natalie's a mess. What more do you want?" What did he want? Russell had asked himself this question repeatedly over the past month. The initial rush of satisfaction from his Thanksgiving revenge had faded, leaving a persistent emptiness. Each new blow against the Montgomerys filled that void temporarily, but it never lasted. "I want them to understand," Russell finally said. "Really understand what they did. Not just to me, but to everyone around them. How their arrogance and entitlement poisoned everything they touched. And punishing Beverly will accomplish that." Scott challenged. Russell didn't answer immediately. Beverly Montgomery had been the social architect of the family, carefully constructing their image and connections. She'd been the one who suggested Natalie pursue Teddy in college, who later encouraged Natalie to date Russell when his career showed promise, who orchestrated the accidental reunion with Teddy at the charity gala last year. "Maybe not," Russell admitted. "Maybe nothing will." That evening, Russell received an email from Beverly with the subject line, "Please read." He almost deleted it unread, but curiosity won out. "Russell, I write not to beg for mercy, but to offer understanding. You believe we never accepted you, that we looked down on you from the beginning. You're right. We did. Philip and I came from old Boston families who valued pedigree over character. We raised our daughters to believe the same. When Natalie brought you home, brilliant, driven, but from South Boston with no connections, we saw only what you lacked, not what you offered. This doesn't excuse Natalie's betrayal or our treatment of you. Nothing can. But perhaps it helps you understand why it happened. We taught her to value the wrong things, and she learned that lesson too well. Our family is in ruins now. Philip's reputation is destroyed. Our social circle has abandoned us. Natalie is broken in ways I never imagined possible. Your revenge is complete and thorough. If that brings you peace, so be it. You've earned it. But if you're still empty inside despite all this, perhaps consider that destruction, however justified, rarely heals the destroyer. Beverly Montgomery. Russell read the email 3 times, anger rising with each reading. Beverly was still manipulating, still trying to control the narrative, portraying herself as insightful and regretful while subtly suggesting Russell's revenge was somehow damaging him more than them. He deleted the email without replying and poured himself a scotch. As he sipped the amber liquid, his phone buzzed with another text from Scott. Just saw Natalie outside your old office. She looked terrible. Security turned her away, but she just sat on the bench across the street for hours in the cold. Is this really what you wanted? Russell set down his drink and walked to the window. New York sparkled below, millions of lives intersecting in complex patterns. Somewhere in Boston, Natalie sat alone in the cold. Philip lay in his hospital bed, contemplating his ruined legacy. Beverly crafted careful emails, trying to salvage what remained of her family's dignity. He'd won, completely and utterly. So why did victory taste so hollow? Russell pulled out his phone and began composing an email to his real estate agent in Boston. It was time to accelerate his plans for the future, a future far from Boston and the wreckage he'd created there. He would build something new, something untainted by the past. As for the Montgomerys and their suffering, they had designed their own fate just as surely as Russell designed buildings. The collapse of their world was simply the inevitable result of structural flaws they'd ignored for too long. Chapter 7. Clearing the site. 6 months after the divorce, Russell stood on the observation deck of Chicago's Willis Tower, surveying the city that would be his new home. Below, the streets formed a perfect grid, logical, organized, predictable. Everything Boston was not. His phone vibrated with a text from his Chicago realtor. Closing documents ready for South Loop property. Can meet tomorrow at 10. Russell had purchased a historic industrial building he planned to convert into his new home and office space. A project that would consume his time and creative energy for at least a year. Exactly what he needed. Another message appeared. Doug with his weekly Boston update. Philip pleaded guilty to reduced charges. 18 months probation, permanent loss of medical license, $1.2 million in fines. Beverly selling Beacon Hill House. Natalie working at Montgomery Dental as receptionist. Russell felt nothing reading the update. The sharp satisfaction of revenge had dulled to indifference. The Montgomerys were no longer central characters in his story, just footnotes in a chapter he'd finished reading. His new architectural firm, Web Design Group, had opened its Chicago office 3 months ago. He'd brought key staff from Boston, but left the original firm intact under new leadership, selling his controlling interest to his employees through a favorable stock option plan. It had earned him loyalty from his Boston team, while allowing him the fresh start he needed. As Russell descended to the street level, his phone rang. Scott calling from Boston. Congratulations on the building purchase, his brother said. When do I get to see this industrial palace you're creating? Once there's an actual livable space, Russell replied. Right now it's just concrete and potential. Speaking of potential, Scott said carefully, I had coffee with Meredith Klein yesterday. Russell paused on the sidewalk. Teddy's ex-wife? What? She's selling their house. Needed an agent. Scott had transitioned from finance to real estate 2 years ago. She asked about you. What about me? Russell asked, suddenly wary. How you were doing. Whether you'd found someone new. She's divorcing Teddy, obviously. I'm aware, Russell said shortly. The divorce was finalized months ago. She's actually pretty amazing, Russell. Nothing like Teddy. Smart, direct, no games. I think you might. Stop, Russell interrupted. I'm not interested in dating. Especially not someone connected to that situation. It's been 6 months, Scott said gently. Not everyone is Natalie. This isn't about Natalie, Russell snapped, then caught himself. Sorry, I'm just focused on the new firm and the building renovation. Dating isn't on my agenda. After hanging up, Russell admitted to himself that his reaction had been disproportionate. The truth was, Natalie's betrayal had damaged something fundamental in him, his ability to trust. The idea of opening himself to that vulnerability again was unthinkable. That evening, Russell worked late in his temporary Chicago office, reviewing plans for the industrial building's conversion. Around midnight, his phone rang, unknown Boston number. Against his better judgment, he answered. Russell. Natalie's voice was almost unrecognizable, hoarse and hesitant. Please don't hang up. Russell said nothing, but didn't end the call. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, she continued. I'm not calling to ask for anything. I needed to tell you I'm sorry. Really sorry. What I did was unforgivable. Russell remained silent, memories of their life together flashing through his mind. I'm in treatment now, Natalie said into the silence. Therapy. Trying to understand why I destroyed something so good, so precious. Her voice broke. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I recognize what I lost. What I threw away. Russell finally spoke, his voice controlled. Is that all? Yes, she whispered. Except, I hope you find happiness, Russell. Real happiness. You deserve it. After she hung up, Russell sat motionless, staring at his phone. Part of him wanted to call her back, not out of forgiveness, but to ask the questions that still haunted him. Had she ever truly loved him? Was their entire marriage a calculation on her part? Was there any part of it that had been real? But he knew those answers wouldn't heal anything. Better to leave the past buried and focus on rebuilding. The next morning, Russell met with his contractor at the South Loop building. As they walked through the cavernous space, discussing structural modifications, Russell's vision for the property crystallized. The main floor would become Web Design Group's showcase office. Open, transparent, filled with natural light. The upper floors would transform into his private residence, not ostentatious like the Boston house, but thoughtfully designed for comfort and solitude. We can preserve most of these original brick walls, the contractor noted, but the support columns need reinforcement. Do it, Russell agreed. I want to honor the building's history while making it functional for the future. As Russell inspected the space, his phone buzzed with an email alert. The sender was Beverly Montgomery. His instinct was to delete it unread, but curiosity prevailed. Russell, we've sold the Beacon Hill house. As we prepared to move, I found these in Philip's study. They belong to you more than they belong to us. Beverly. Attached were photographs of architectural drawings, Russell's earliest designs, sketches he'd shared with Natalie when they were first dating. He'd thought them lost years ago. Russell studied the images, remembering the night he'd shown them to Natalie over cheap wine in his apartment. How she'd understood immediately what he was trying to achieve. How she'd offered suggestions that actually improved the concepts. It had been one of the moments he fell in love with her, finding someone who could see his vision and enhance it. He closed the email without responding and returned to the contractor, who was waiting for direction on the next phase. Let's open up that wall, Russell decided, pointing to a brick partition. I want to see what's behind it. As the day progressed, Russell found himself making decisions with unusual certainty. The building was speaking to him in a way no project had since before the divorce. Its solid foundations and hidden potential resonated with something in him. The part that still believed in creating rather than destroying. That evening, back in his hotel suite, Russell received another text from Scott. Found something in storage you might want. Your graduation project model, the community center design that won the university prize. Still intact. Shipped to Chicago? Russell smiled slightly. Yes, please. It belongs in the new office. As Russell prepared for bed, his phone rang again. Doug calling outside their usual update schedule. Sorry to bother you, his lawyer began. But I thought you should know. Philip Montgomery died this evening. Heart attack. Beverly asked if you'd want to be notified. Russell sat heavily on the edge of the bed. Philip, his longtime adversary and former father-in-law, gone. The man who had looked down on him for years, who had encouraged Natalie's worst instincts, who had never seen Russell as good enough regardless of his success. Russell? You there? Doug prompted. Yes, Russell replied. Thank you for letting me know. Will you attend the funeral? Doug asked carefully. No, Russell said firmly. That chapter is closed. After hanging up, Russell walked to the window, looking out at Chicago's nightscape. Philip's death should have felt like a final victory, the ultimate downfall of the man who had never respected him. Instead, it felt emptier than anything that had come before. In that moment, Russell realized something important. Revenge, no matter how complete, couldn't rebuild what had been broken inside him. Only creating something new could do that. He returned to his desk and opened his laptop, pulling up the building renovation plans. For the next several hours, he lost himself in design work, adding details and refinements that would transform the space from merely functional to truly exceptional. Around dawn, Russell finally closed his laptop and went to bed, sleeping more peacefully than he had in months. In his dreams, he walked through the completed building, not alone, but surrounded by colleagues, friends, and possibilities. Chapter 8. Solid Ground. 18 months after the divorce, Russell stood in the center of his completed Chicago building, watching as staff members arranged furniture and equipment for the official opening of Web Design Group's headquarters. The transformation from abandoned industrial space to architectural showcase had been featured in 3 design magazines, cementing Russell's reputation in the Chicago market. "The client from the Milan project is here," his assistant informed him, and the mayor's office called to confirm his attendance at tonight's reception. Russell nodded, adjusting his tie before the wall of windows that offered a stunning view of the Chicago skyline. At 44, he looked different than he had in Boston, more distinguished, with touches of gray at his temples and a leaner physique from his new rowing regimen on Lake Michigan. The past year and a half had been productive. Web Design Group had secured major contracts in Chicago, New York, and internationally. Russell had assembled a team of talented architects who shared his vision for innovative, sustainable design. His personal living space on the building's top floors had won an architectural award for adaptive reuse of historic structures. By all objective measures, Russell had successfully rebuilt his life. Yet something essential remained missing. As Russell greeted the Milan client, his phone buzzed with a text from Scott. "Landed at O'Hare. Hotel first, then heading to you. Should be there by 3. Russell smiled. His brother's visit was perfectly timed. Scott would attend tonight's reception and then stay for the weekend, their first real time together in months. The day progressed in a whirlwind of meetings, interviews with architectural press, and final preparations for the evening event. Around 3, Russell's assistant appeared at his office door. "Your brother's here," she said. "And he's not alone." Before Russell could respond, Scott entered, followed by Meredith Klein. Russell froze momentarily, then recovered his composure. "Meredith, this is unexpected. Blame Scott," she replied with a directness he remembered from their few previous interactions. "He convinced me Chicago in January was somehow appealing. I mentioned I was coming for your big opening," Scott explained, not looking remotely apologetic. Meredith mentioned she'd never seen your work in person. One thing led to another. Russell shot his brother a look that promised later retribution, then turned to Meredith. "Well, since you're here, would you like a tour?" "I'd love one," she said, her gaze taking in the office's soaring ceilings and exposed brick. "This space is already impressive." As Russell guided them through the building, he found himself seeing it anew through Meredith's thoughtful questions and observations. Unlike Natalie, who had always focused on how architectural spaces might impress others, Meredith seemed genuinely interested in the creative and technical decisions behind the design. "The cantilever on this staircase is remarkable," she noted, examining the seemingly floating structure. "How did you achieve that without visible supports?" Russell explained the engineering principles involved, surprised by her understanding. "I was an engineering major before switching to graphic design," she explained, catching his expression. "The structural mathematics always fascinated me." By the time they reached Russell's private residence, Scott had manufactured an excuse to take a business call, leaving them alone. "Your brother isn't particularly subtle," Meredith observed with a wry smile. "Subtlety has never been his strong suit," Russell agreed, finding himself unexpectedly comfortable in her presence. "Would you like something to drink?" "Coffee. Wine. Coffee would be perfect," she replied. "I'm still on Boston time." In the kitchen, a masterpiece of minimalist design with warm wood elements, Russell prepared coffee while Meredith studied the architectural drawings framed on the walls. "These are extraordinary," she said, examining a hand-sketched concept for a sustainable housing development. "So different from the corporate work you're known for." "A personal project," Russell explained, bringing her coffee. "Something I've been developing in my spare time." "You should build it," Meredith said decisively. "It's visionary." Russell found himself sharing his plans for the project, a mixed-income community with innovative green spaces and energy systems. As they talked, he realized how long it had been since he'd had a conversation that flowed so naturally, without calculation or hidden agendas. I should ask, Russell said finally, how much has Scott told you about everything that happened in Boston? Meredith's expression grew serious. Enough. I lived through my own version of it, remember? Teddy was my husband. Ex-husband. Russell corrected automatically. Very ex, she agreed. Last I heard, he's practicing cosmetic surgery in Florida under a slightly different name. Apparently, there's always a market for discounted Botox. Russell couldn't help smiling at her tone. You don't seem bitter. I was, she admitted. For a while. But bitterness is like building on a contaminated site. Nothing healthy grows there. The architectural metaphor wasn't lost on Russell. He'd spent months designing this building, creating the perfect space for his new life, yet had neglected to address the contamination in his own foundation. I should get ready for tonight's reception, Russell said, glancing at his watch. Will you be attending? If the invitation still stands, Meredith replied. I brought a suitable dress, thanks to Scott's warning. It definitely stands, Russell assured her. After Meredith left with Scott to prepare at their hotel, Russell found himself thinking about her words. Had he been building his new life on contaminated ground? The success of Web Design Group, his award-winning building, his growing reputation in Chicago, all constructed atop the ruins of his marriage and his scorched earth revenge. That evening, the reception exceeded expectations. Chicago's architectural community, business leaders, and city officials filled the main floor of the building, admiring the space and congratulating Russell on his firm's success. The mayor gave a brief speech praising Web Design Group's contributions to the city's architectural landscape. Throughout the event, Russell found his gaze repeatedly drawn to Meredith, elegant in a simple dark blue dress, engaged in animated conversation with various guests. Unlike Natalie, who had performed at such events, playing the role of successful architect's wife, Meredith seemed genuinely interested in the people and ideas around her. Near the end of the evening, as the crowd thinned, Russell's assistant approached with a message. A call came in for you earlier, she said quietly. From Boston, Natalie Montgomery. She asked me to tell you that her mother passed away yesterday. Beverly. Russell absorbed this information with surprise. Beverly, the family matriarch, the social architect of the Montgomerys, gone. First Philip, now Beverly. She didn't ask you to call back, his assistant added. Just wanted you to know. Russell nodded, thanking her. Across the room, he caught Meredith watching him, her expression questioning. He crossed to her. Bad news? She asked perceptively. My former mother-in-law died, Russell explained. Heart failure, most likely. I'm sorry, Meredith said, her compassion genuine. Complicated feelings, I imagine. Surprisingly uncomplicated, Russell admitted. I thought I'd feel something. Satisfaction, perhaps. Or closure. Instead, I just feel empty, Meredith suggested. Yes, Russell agreed. Empty. Revenge is like that, she said quietly. It promises fulfillment, but delivers hollowness. Russell studied her face, struck by the understanding he saw there. You sound like you speak from experience. My revenge against Teddy was less dramatic than yours, Meredith explained, but no less deliberate. I made sure every friend we had knew exactly what he'd done, in excruciating detail. I systematically destroyed his social standing in Boston. And when it was done, I felt nothing. The reception wound down around them, staff beginning the subtle process of clearing glasses and plates. Scott caught Russell's eye from across the room, pointedly checked his watch, then gave a thumbs up before slipping out, leaving them alone again. Would you like to get some air? Russell asked impulsively. There's a rooftop terrace with a decent view, if you don't mind the cold. Meredith agreed, and minutes later they stood bundled in their coats on the building's roof terrace, Chicago spread before them in a tapestry of lights. The January air was biting but clear, stars visible despite the city's glow. I haven't told anyone this, Russell said suddenly, but I've been thinking about reaching out to Natalie. Not to reconcile, he added quickly, seeing Meredith's expression. Just to, I don't know, close that chapter properly. What would you say to her? Meredith asked, her breath visible in the cold air. Russell considered the question. I'm not sure. That I understand now that revenge doesn't heal anything? That despite everything, I hope she finds peace? Would you mean it? Meredith challenged gently. I think I would, Russell realized. Not for her sake, but for mine. Carrying this weight, it's exhausting. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city below. Russell felt something shift inside him, a loosening of the tight, hard knot that had formed when he'd discovered Natalie's betrayal. Not forgiveness, exactly, but a release. A decision to stop allowing that betrayal to define his future. "I'm glad Scott brought you here," Russell said finally, even if his matchmaking was embarrassingly transparent. Meredith laughed, the sound bright in the winter air. "Me too. Though I should warn you, I'm not looking for anything serious. I'm still rebuilding my own life, figuring out who I am beyond Teddy Klein's ex-wife." "I understand completely," Russell assured her. "I'm still figuring out who I am beyond the architect who orchestrated the perfect revenge." "Maybe," Meredith suggested, "we could figure it out together. As friends, to start." "I'd like that," Russell agreed, feeling something long dormant stir within him. Not passion or desire, but possibility. The possibility of building something new, on solid ground this time. As they returned inside from the terrace, Russell found himself seeing his building differently, not just as a monument to his professional rebirth, but as the beginning of a more personal reconstruction. A place where he might, eventually, build a life that wasn't defined by what he'd lost, but by what he could still create. Chapter 9. Inhabitable Spaces. 3 years after the divorce, Russell stood at the entrance to Oak Grove Cemetery in Boston, a simple bouquet of white lilies in hand. The April morning was cool but bright, spring asserting itself after a long winter. He hadn't planned to visit the Montgomery family plot during this brief business trip to Boston. But something had drawn him here, a need for final closure perhaps, or simply acknowledgement of the journey that had brought him to this point. Russell walked slowly through the cemetery until he found the large granite monument marked Montgomery. Fresh flowers adorned the recently added names, Philip and Beverly. Russell placed his lilies beside them and stood in silence, not praying but reflecting. These people had been his family for 12 years. Despite their condescension and Philip's corruption, despite Beverly's manipulations, they had been connected to him. Their deaths had left him feeling neither victorious nor vindicated, just aware of life's impermanence and the futility of sustained anger. "I thought that might be you." Russell turned to find Natalie standing several yards away, dressed simply in jeans and a light jacket. Her appearance had changed, hair shorter, face thinner, eyes holding a weariness that hadn't been there before. "Natalie," he acknowledged with a nod. "I was in town for meetings. Thought I should pay my respects." She approached cautiously, stopping at a respectful distance. "Thank you for the flowers. That was unexpected." An awkward silence fell between them, former spouses with too much history and too many wounds. "How's Chicago?" Natalie finally asked. "Good," Russell replied. "The firm is doing well. We just won the contract for the new Performing Arts Center. I saw that in the architectural press," she said. "Congratulations. The design is beautiful." Another silence, less strained. "And you?" Russell asked. "How are you doing?" Natalie gave a small shrug. "One day at a time. I'm still at my uncle's dental practice, taking night classes in dental hygiene." Russell nodded, surprised to feel neither satisfaction nor pity at her reduced circumstances, just a gentle acknowledgement of her efforts to rebuild. "I never properly apologized," Natalie said suddenly. "Not really. I said I was sorry, but I never truly acknowledged the depth of what I did to you." Russell shifted uncomfortably. "That's not necessary." "It is," she interrupted firmly. "I betrayed you completely, Russell. Not just with Teddy, but in 1,000 small ways before that. I let my family's values override my own. I forgot who I was and what actually mattered." Her directness startled him. This wasn't the Natalie he'd known, the woman who deflected and manipulated to avoid difficult truths. "What happened to Teddy?" Russell asked, genuinely curious. "Florida," Natalie said with a hint of bitterness. "Reinvented himself as a Botox specialist to the nouveau riche. He left owing me $20,000 and 3 years of my life." Despite everything, Russell found himself suppressing a smile. "At least you found out who he really was." "Yes," Natalie agreed. "Too late, but yes." They stood together in surprisingly comfortable silence, the spring breeze rustling the cemetery's awakening trees. "I heard you're seeing someone," Natalie said eventually. "Meredith Klein? Scott mentioned it last time I ran into him." Russell nodded, unable to prevent the slight smile that appeared at the mention of Meredith's name. "We've been together about 2 years now. She moved to Chicago last year to expand her graphic design business. I'm glad, Natalie said, sounding genuinely sincere. Scott says she's remarkable. She is, Russell confirmed. Different from anyone I've known. The unspoken comparison hung between them, acknowledged but not painful. Will you marry again? Natalie asked. Russell considered the question. Maybe. We're not rushing anything. Building slowly, on solid ground this time. Natalie nodded, understanding the architectural metaphor that had once been their shared language. I should go, Russell said, checking his watch. Flight back to Chicago leaves at 2. Of course, Natalie replied. Thank you for coming here. It means something, that you can stand at my parents' grave without hate. The hate burned itself out long ago, Russell admitted. It was exhausting to maintain. As he turned to leave, Natalie called after him. Russell? I hope you find happiness. Real, lasting happiness. You always deserve that. Russell paused, struck by the echo of similar words she'd spoken years ago, during that late-night phone call when she was still drinking heavily. But this time, they rang true, spoken from a place of genuine regret rather than desperate manipulation. I think I have, he replied honestly. I hope you find it too, Natalie. Driving away from the cemetery, Russell felt the final weights of his past lifting. The revenge that had once consumed him now seemed like a distant chapter in someone else's story, something he could acknowledge without being defined by it. His phone buzzed with a text from Meredith. Meeting finished early. Found amazing vintage blueprints at that shop I mentioned. Perfect for your office wall. Love you. Russell smiled, tapping out a quick reply before heading to the airport. The past was finally where it belonged, behind him. 2 days later, Russell stood in the bedroom of his Chicago penthouse, adjusting his tie before a floor-to-ceiling window. Beyond the glass, Lake Michigan stretched like a private sea, morning sunlight dancing across its surface. You're overthinking it, Meredith said, appearing in the doorway. She crossed to him, beautiful in a simple emerald dress, and straightened his already perfect tie. They're just investors, not architecture critics. These particular investors control funding for the Sustainable Housing Project, Russell reminded her. 2 years of planning comes down to this presentation, which you will nail, Meredith assured him, her confidence unwavering. Because it's brilliant and necessary and entirely you. Russell studied her face, still amazed by the partnership they'd built. Equal, honest, supportive without sacrificing independence. So different from what he'd had with Natalie. How was Boston? Meredith asked, having returned from her own business trip to New York the previous day. Productive, Russell replied. And unexpected. I visited the Montgomery graves. Meredith's eyebrows rose in surprise. Closure. Something like that, Russell agreed. Natalie was there. Ah, Meredith said, watching his face carefully. And how was that? Strangely okay, Russell admitted. She's changed. Or maybe I have. Probably both. Meredith nodded, understanding as always. Did it help? Seeing her? It did, Russell realized. It confirmed what I've been feeling. That chapter is truly closed. Not just intellectually, but emotionally. Good, Meredith said simply, kissing him lightly. Now focus on this chapter. The one where you revolutionize affordable housing and make me obscenely proud. Russell laughed, feeling the familiar surge of gratitude for her presence in his life. Have I mentioned lately that I love you? You have, Meredith confirmed with a smile. But it bears repeating. An hour later, Russell stood before a group of investors, presenting his vision for the sustainable housing community. As he explained the innovative design elements, the social integration components, the environmental benefits, he felt a certainty he hadn't experienced in years. This project wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It wasn't driven by anger or revenge or the need for validation. It was simply good design, architecture that served human needs while respecting the environment. Work that would outlast him, that would matter. During a brief break, Russell stepped outside onto the building's terrace for some air. Chicago sprawled before him, a city that had given him a second chance. His phone buzzed with a text from Scott. Just heard about Natalie's engagement to that dentist she works for. Thought you should know before the Boston gossip mill gets to you. You okay with that? Russell smiled, typing back, completely okay. Hope he makes her happy. And he meant it. The man who had orchestrated devastating revenge against his unfaithful wife and her family had evolved into someone capable of wishing them well. Not from weakness or denial, but from the strength that comes with true healing. Russell returned to the meeting room, where Meredith waited with the investors. As he resumed his presentation, he caught her encouraging smile from the back of the room and felt profoundly grateful for the life he'd built, not on the ruins of revenge, but on the solid foundation of his own resilience. Later that evening, as they walked along Lake Michigan's shore, Meredith linked her arm through his. The investors said yes, didn't they? I can tell by your face. Full funding, Russell confirmed. Construction begins next month. I knew it, she said triumphantly. It's too important not to happen. Russell stopped walking, turning to face her. Move in with me. Officially. No more maintaining separate places. Meredith studied his face. You're sure? No more needing your own space, your own sanctuary? I'm sure, Russell said firmly. I don't need walls anymore. I just need you. As they continued their walk, making plans for combining their lives more fully, Russell reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The devastating betrayal, the calculated revenge, the hollow victory, the slow, difficult process of rebuilding, not just a career or a home, but himself. The architect in him recognized a fundamental truth. Sometimes the strongest structures arise only after complete demolition. The old foundation, cracked and compromised, must be entirely removed before something truly stable can be constructed. His revenge against the Montgomerys hadn't healed him. It had simply cleared the site, removing the damaged structure of his old life. The healing had come later, through the patient work of rebuilding, relationship by relationship, day by day. Russell Webb, once defined by betrayal and revenge, had finally designed and constructed his masterpiece. A life built on forgiveness, purpose, and the courage to love again without reservation. Not a perfect structure, but one with integrity, one that could withstand the inevitable storms of life. And unlike the perfect revenge he'd once engineered, this creation brought genuine peace. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.